Hello, everybody. We were a bit of a hurry to get everything set up here, so I apologize for that.
I just took my time out there.
Hello, Eric.
Day 2 of Microsoft Ignite 2019 live with the DFW SharePoint community. I'm joined today by Chris Webb, John Skinner, and the one and only.
Let me get to it.
Hello.
Right.
So in a moment here, I will go ahead and share today our topic is going to be all things power.
You guys just send me
So
food.
the first thing, though, that we'd like to get from folks is, can you hear us? So somebody's saying they don't have audio on here. So let's see. Can someone give me a chat response saying that you can hear us? Can you hear us?
Yeah,
All
Paul
right.
says we're
Paul
good.
says he can hear us. Okay, great. Paul is joining us here. Paul, I don't.
Okay, thank you.
Paul, are you there?
Okay.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Paul, speak to us, Paul.
I'm speaking.
He's
Yeah,
talking, but
it might be hard to pull that in here.
Yeah, we probably just can't hear you over the
very loud
noise in the background here.
I'm monitoring chat. If you got anything to add
Yeah.
in, I'll.
All right, so Chris will monitor the chat. There you are on, Paul. If you want to talk, they'll be able to hear you. It's just that we can't. Right. So a few housekeeping things as per usual. If you have any questions, please post them into the chat so we can respond to them. If you have some issues in your browser, Chrome with the default profile works best. If you need to use any variant of Edge, you can do so, but you'll probably want to switch to webcast mode before you do that, which buffers the stream for you. It's a little bit better experience on that particular platform. The recordings will be available on our YouTube channel. We'll have those next week. All 5 recordings from the week. We'll push them all out. And when are you doing your Power Hour? Tomorrow?
Tomorrow at 2:20.
Tomorrow at 2:20. For those listening live, that will be the 6th of November.
Sure.
Okay. November 6th at
Yes.
2:20 Eastern time. Laura will be doing her Power Hour presentation. So how do they find out? Is there something on the conference site where you can see all these things? Or
The podcasts are listed. The locations are just not listed because these rooms don't have a spot for an audience. So they
Right.
but in the app, they are listed.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay. So attendees who have the app can go find it. Everyone else can just
And
go
they
to your
can come
website.
stalk us. And yeah.
Peer in through the window. Hello.
All right.
Like that guy over there tapping on the window.
So, all right. So you'll be able to watch Laura tomorrow as well in her regular. Is this your regular Power Hour?
Regular day, regularly power hours
It's usually
at
10
11
o'clock.
Central. Yeah.
Yeah, 10 or 11.
So it's a couple hours off, but same day.
Okay. Very good. As you can see behind us, that is the Ignite Live stage behind us. So we are on the show floor here at Ignite, a little quieter than it was yesterday, which was exceptionally loud. We're in the podcast booth today, so it's a little bit quieter. But was that the keynote stage behind us? Is that where they actually did the keynote from?
The back one, with all
Yeah.
the screens on it.
So, which is kind of cool because they're showing breakout sessions on the screens, and you can go get headphones, and then you can go hang
Chill,
out.
relax. Yep.
Because you can't hardly get into any of the
You
breakout
can't.
rooms.
Yeah, I haven't gotten into any of them. I've had to come down here and listen to them all.
Wow.
Yeah, it kind of
Or they're
depends.
live
It's hit or
streaming, so you can
miss.
just do it from your hotel room.
Yeah, sure.
I
pay
have
your
learned that trick
$2,500
over the
and then
years.
sit in your hotel room the whole time.
I used to be a frequent come here before lunch attendee. It's because get up in the morning, pop the laptop open, just watch what you want, come in at noon.
All right, probably not a bad way to go. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with our content for today. So I will drop some files in here, really just so we have some talking points to go through. We're going to focus on the announcements around the Power Platform stuff, which I guess Flo is now considered a first-class citizen in the Power Platform now that it's
Just
Power
because it's got a
Automate.
different name. I
Well,
think
because it says Power.
That's right. At least it's not Power Flow, which apparently was on
One
the
of the
table.
options. Yeah, that one is
Yeah.
pretty bad.
That would have been awkward.
Yeah, very much so. Right. So I want to thank our sponsors. First of all, of course, BinaryWave and Training Plus, who are sponsoring this entire series, and IW Mentor. So tell us about IW Mentor.
IW Mentor is my training company. It's an online training company, and I teach SharePoint, Power Apps, and Power Automate. Power Apps is 2 words now too. So
I
that's
saw that.
that's
Seriously,
fun.
they actually said that. I didn't know
Big,
this.
big news.
Yeah. So it's and I have it. It ranges from beginner to SharePoint beginner to SharePoint Power user to advanced, which is advanced Power Apps and Flow, more like citizen developer type person. And I have all the content is on demand, just self-paced. And as far as a live class, I have a live online advanced Power Apps and Flow class that is 3 days of Power Apps and 3 days of Flow. The next one's going to be in January.
Wow.
All right.
And
Everybody on the chat, please wish Eric Shups a happy birthday.
I don't want to wait till January.
Okay. So on the live class, they just join you on what they
We
get
use
on the
Teams.
GoToMeeting. Okay, on the Teams.
Yeah.
And then,
And then
do
I
you have your own
record
course
that.
material?
Yeah,
Or,
uh-huh.
okay.
It's a full course. It's got quizzes. It's got labs to go through. It's just slides. All
So
the
all
above.
someone needs is an O365 tenant or trial,
Well,
and they're good to go.
yeah. Actually, I have a program an ultimate student package that you can buy, and when you sign up for the live online class, you actually get a month of ultimate free, which is you get a student account in my tenant.
Okay.
So that way you just log as a student account. I've shared a bunch of flows actually. You know how you can share
Mhm.
flows out with certain groups of people. So I've shared a bunch of flows so they get a lot of examples
Okay.
to try stuff out in addition to all the labs and have that environment to be able to work in. So, but beyond that, if you're not an ultimate student, then you just do it in your own tenant.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. All right. And how long is that good for? They get to student year. A year? Is it like a subscription?
For
sort of
if you it is a subscription service, so it's $50 a month if you want to pay monthly, or it's like $900 to pay by the year. You get a T-shirt, fly a year, but if you take a live class, you get a month of ultimate
Okay.
free.
Okay.
As part of it.
Fantastic. In fact, we have T-shirts around here somewhere. You brought some. What'd you do with yours, Chris?
I thought you were going to put it on.
Bag.
For those of you who are here at Ignite, Laura's wandering around with T-shirts. So make
Yes,
sure you get a T-shirt while they last.
I brought about 100 at least. So yeah.
There you go.
So, all right. So to find out more about IW Mentor, they would go to iwmentor.com. There you are. All right. So session schedule, just to reiterate, tomorrow we'll be back on again at 4 p.m. Central Time. And then the time switches up for Thursday to 1:30 p.m. Central, and then on Friday at 11:30 Central. Friday, we're going to try and do Teams tomorrow is our plan. If Chris can get away long enough, we're going to try and focus on Teams tomorrow and deep dive on all the announcements there. Friday will be Power BI with John White and possibly Jason Himmelstein if we can get him here. Thursday will be Rob Bogue. We'll be talking all about Project Cortex and ECM and other SharePoint goodness. That is our schedule. You should get an email every day inviting you to that particular day's webinar if you haven't already signed up to the webinar series. So keep an eye out for that. Otherwise, you can go to dfwsharepoint.com, hit the register link, and it'll take you to the series registration page. To see our videos, go to our channel on Big Marker, or you can hit our YouTube channel, which we just recently launched, that has all of our webcasts on it. As I said, we'll get these pushed out next week for everyone, so keep an eye on the YouTube channel there. We'll also have links to our sponsors, IW Mentor, and others as well, so you can follow all of those to learn more on our YouTube channel.
Tom Phillips says happy birthday, Eric.
He does. Well, thank you very, and to you as well, sir.
Happy birthday.
Appreciate
Was that
it.
yesterday or today?
Well, mine was yesterday. His is today.
Oh wow.
Happy birthday.
both
So-
of you.
Jennifer Mason's tomorrow.
And Jennifer's was yesterday.
Oh, was it?
Hers is the
Oh,
same
y'all
as
the same
mine.
day?
Yeah.
Nice.
Somebody's maybe is it Paul that has a birthday? Yeah, I think Paul's.
I don't know when Paul's birthday is coming up. Paul, when is your birthday?
Pretty sure his is the 3rd or the tomorrow. Yeah,
He
he's
is
the one
tomorrow.
tomorrow.
How did all the people who run the DFW user group end up with almost the exact same birthday?
I don't know.
That
That's
is crazy.
crazy.
That's weird.
4 of us within 2 days.
Yeah, that's a bit bizarre. All right, very good. Well, Paul, get on a plane and come celebrate with us. Quit being antisocial.
Yeah.
So big news that came out from the keynote yesterday that a lot of people are talking about is what we'll be talking about today, and that is that Flow is now Power
Drum
Automate,
roll.
sort of. So let me see if I can get the concept right, because the messaging here seems to be a little odd. Power Automate is a platform now in the Power suite of stuff.
Power platform.
Right? Power Platform. So we have Power Automate, but you still have flows inside of Power Automate, right? So you have different types of flows. Please clear this up for us.
I mean,
it's just not called Microsoft Flow anymore. At least, I'm glad they're not calling each individual thing something else, because them being flows, that makes sense. So I don't know what else.
I mean, I kind of take it into kin to how you have Power Apps, but you have Canvas apps, you have model apps. You kind of got the sub breakout of different types of apps. Kind of think that's the similar. Power Automate has flows, and it's probably in business process flows. Maybe there's other things that fall under that same umbrella, similar to that naming convention. I'd assume.
Well, my understanding is we have different types of flows that you can create. I'm not a big flow user, but there's different types of flows, and now there's the UI flow. We'll talk about that as well. So is the idea there
AI
that
flow?
Huh?
AI flow.
AI flow.
There's a UI thing
UI
too,
flow.
though.
Really?
Yeah,
Yes.
the thing that's
There's the AI builder for UI flows.
See, here we go
Right.
already. Confusing us.
It's the acronym party. Yay.
We are sufficiently confused, as are all of you, about this whole flow business.
So the
Paul, I'm trying to
UI
get you
thing
some audio here.
is apparently kind of like creating a macro in Excel. I think Microsoft came to the realization that they push out all these products, and you still have people using thousands of spreadsheets with macros in them. That's just what they do. You have banks and you have all these big companies that they're not moving away from their macro spreadsheets, and that's the way they run their business. And Microsoft's now going to them and embracing that. And so this new thing, this UI thing, is sort of like having a.
Paul, speak to us.
I'm speaking now. Can you hear me?
We can hear him now. Yeah, I just need to make sure I cover.
Hey, all right.
So we don't get got to cover up the microphone.
Got the birthday crew.
Right. So there he is. Paul is joining us. So.
Yeah, and I asked, is SharePoint going to be called PowerPoint now?
Well, obviously.
PowerShare.
PowerPoint part of our platform now. That's deep thoughts.
PowerShare.
They're going to have to change the name of PowerPoint, or it's going to be part of Power Platform.
Yeah. PowerPoint becomes PowerPoint.
The space between PowerPoint.
Power Hour Point. Hey.
PowerPoint.
So I don't know if we're getting echo from Paul's audio coming through here. I hope not, but let's see what we can do.
I don't think so. I'll go back on mute.
Well, we'd like to have you on. All right, so let's break this down a little bit, because we've already talked about UI flows, which are robotic process automation. Right? And for those not familiar with that term, it basically means you're training a bot to go and do things that you would normally do in the UI. So click here, navigate here, enter this information,
like a macro.
download this file. It is like recording a macro, except they're exceptionally advanced macros. And
Smarter.
Robotic process automation, which I've dealt with for years, is a very deep and complex subject. It sounds easy on the surface. Go, oh, I'm just going to record where people click on the screen, right? But different screen resolutions, things resize, they're not always viewed the same, different browsers. It's really hard to do RPA well, which is why there's only a few vendors in the space. It's why Nintex spent a lot of money to buy Foxtrot to get into that space. And Microsoft is now dipping its toe in some really deep waters. And like we were talking to a fellow earlier about, they're now sort of trying to be everything in this space, and which is a noble effort, but one has to wonder, getting into something that complex, are they going to invest heavily enough in it to make it work?
Right.
I mean, this is all
maybe
new,
that's
so we
why
don't
the
know.
pricing model changed.
Well,
something.
So
going.
I missed the presentation on this. So is it similar? Because there used to be like training tools out there that would show you click here, do that, and
No,
then tie to a back end? Or
So this is something I used to use a long time ago. I haven't really even used this lately. And you record. So it's if you need to automate something, and it's an old like VB program, right? Old VB app or even an Access app or something, right? And you want to automate that. So it's like, okay, well, the user's going to click this button and then they're going to type something in here and then they're going to hit submit. And you want to automate that. So it records. So you do it one time to record it, right? And then you can
feed that into Flow at that point. So it's kind of giving you that UI element in your Office apps.
Yeah.
Right. So
SharePoint
in
or
Flow
whatever.
now you can say, hey, Flow, go and open my time and billing system, right? And click import and then select this batch file that it got from somewhere else and hit go and do that for me every night. And Flow will now do that as a flow. Apparently.
And you have to have a little
That's interesting.
gateway installed on your
Yeah.
computer
Oh,
that's running the
Wait, say
cell or
that
whatever it
again?
is. You have to have a little client like a gateway installed on the desktop computer that's going to be doing
Yes.
the
Right.
process.
Yes.
So now you're going to have a VDI or something, probably not a VDI, but a server probably set up somewhere in your data center in Azure, right? That's going to be sitting there waiting for those requests, and you've got all these apps installed on it so that it can go automate these requests because you don't want to have it on some guy's laptop,
Bob's
right?
desktop,
Because
yeah.
I mean
But
that's
they're
not going to
gonna
work.
do that. You
Yeah.
know.
Well,
Yeah,
yeah,
you know
it
they
will
will.
happen for sure.
They will.
But
Well, Flow actually does Power Automate. Actually,
Power
does
Automate.
already have a little gateway. I have a flow that I created just for fun that actually goes into my file system and does something and runs an executable. And so that's probably going to be the same thing or similar.
I would guess that they're probably leveraging that same infrastructure, but that whole typically, and they even use the word legacy in the marketing material for it. And when we say legacy, it typically means we're interacting with old stuff like green screen sometimes and legacy VBNet apps, could be some old ASP.NET app or something along those lines. Those things are really hard to automate inputs and outputs. And if you've ever worked with one of the top tier vendors that does that, they have pretty sophisticated controls around those modeling and how to do inputs and outputs and grab all that stuff and how to facilitate screen changes and all that.
Yeah. I mean, it's
stuff.
not just, the old tools were like move, 20 pixels over, 3 pixels down, right mouse click, right? Like that kind of stuff. Obviously that doesn't work for the things you're talking about before, different screen resolutions and things like that. So screen resolution changes and that all goes out the window. So I mean, you've got to do things where you're doing character recognition and object recognition on the forms themselves so that it knows what button it's supposed to be going and clicking and that sort of thing.
So way back in the day, you probably remember some of this. We wrote a product that had heuristic algorithms that you could define a chain of events, and then if you took a button or something and moved it around on the page, it would still be able to find it, right? Even though you moved it, because it looked at all these various factors to figure out what happened. And we spent a ton of time. I even wrote a patent for it, for the heuristic algorithm that we had created. It took us a lot of time to figure this stuff out, and that was to solve a relatively small challenge. Right? We're talking about, so this is going to be an interesting space, I think, to see how well they do this, how much investment, right? I mean, it's Microsoft. They got the people and they've got the capability. It's will they invest deep enough? Or is this just going to be a really basic thing, a sort of a Me Too thing to tick a Gartner quadrant or something, right? To say, yes, we do RPA. Right? I don't know. So Tom is asking, how does Flow compare to other third-party SharePoint add-ons you use? I assume he's talking about workflow kind of tools. So Laura, what are your thoughts there?
Yeah, the only other one that there's Nintex. The only other one that I've used recently is InfoWise, and it's sort of a light, cheaper. I'm not going to go to Power Ups and Flow kind of product that's really, really end user friendly. And it has, so InfoWise is the only other one that I've used in the last like 3 years or so. And it's easier and simpler.
I think you bring up a big key word in this, and that's cheaper.
Cheaper.
Because now with all the Power Automate, Flow license changes, I don't even know how this Power Automate stuff is going to affect that. It's made Power Automate using flows with premium connectors and whatnot a lot more expensive than the competition when you start looking at it, because those competitors offer unlimited user licenses. So they kind of price themselves out of some of these customers that may have gone that direction because of that change, I believe. So
Yeah, I'm actually a reseller for InfoWise. I have people I sell it, and people that on premises, they have an on premises version, they have a cloud version, they have but yeah, it doesn't go toward the the off the cliff, like the Power Apps cliff, the off Power Automate cliff, like where it starts getting really complicated.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate with the pricing changes, because a lot of people, we're in the position of, well, we're already paying for the Power Platform as part of our M365, O365 stuff. We'll use that versus Nintex or K2 or some other alternative, and now it's not an easy question to answer.
It depends. If you're doing SharePoint stuff, you're keeping it in Office 365. Power Automate flows all the way because it's included with your license. But when you start talking external connectors, other systems, that's where you got to start evaluating things.
But even then, there's caps on the number of them you can do.
Not anymore.
Oh, not anymore?
No, they took a lot of those limits off with the pricing changes.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, we're having a lot of conversations with customers around the pricing model, and it suddenly, the knock against Nintex and K2, for example, used to be that they're very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they're not anymore.
Nope.
When you compare them against the power licensing, so they become very affordable, and all of a sudden, the limitations in Power Automate become significant because there are a lot of them, and as the platform matures, it gets more and more capabilities, but it's going up against platforms that have been around for decades almost.
Yeah.
Right. So this has become a lot more of a deeper conversation than we used to have about this topic, and I think it's going to change the way that people look at implementing it.
They skipped walking, went straight to running.
I think they went straight to Naruto running from walking.
Yeah, my world is mostly just SharePoint, so people creating Power Apps and Power Automate flows
with
SharePoint. And from what I understand, the licensing doesn't affect all this licensing stuff doesn't affect any of that. So I feel like as long as I just stick with SharePoint as the data, then I'll be safe. But that's when it's very confusing once you get beyond that.
Yeah,
that is right now.
The Power Apps and flows that I create, I used to use a lot of the Azure SQL connectors and everything, but with the announcement, I've started just making myself use SharePoint and stuff just for that reason.
Yeah,
so I don't have to worry about licensing.
Now, aren't you limited, right? Like if you've got SQL data you need access to, now what are you bringing it into a SharePoint list first?
Right. No, I mean, it depends on the situation. I mean, I'm building apps from scratch, so I don't have that problem usually.
You just build it from scratch as SharePoint lists instead.
Right, which does issue its own challenges. So there is more dev time and things to design around that, so I would like to just create whatever I wanted. And we had this discussion yesterday that the licensing's really kind of killed innovation for citizen devs and admins that can use that SQL connector to get around security problems or anything like that. But they took that away, so it's almost like, is it worth putting the extra effort in to force yourself to use SharePoint, or is it worth going to fight that battle for money and play the politics to bring in the licensing required to create these things for your entire organization?
But you can just click the button and it'll let you buy it yourself.
Yeah, there you go. That's a sore subject.
The number one flow we should create is the one that you know what? I'm gonna virtual agent, no UI flow. I'm gonna UI flow clicking user voice. Right, to upvote the one that says turn the self-service licensing thing on.
They did. They put in a PowerShell
Ridiculous.
way to do that.
Huh?
They put in a PowerShell way to turn that on.
Insufficient. Yeah. It needs to be in the UI. Oh, well, here's Tom, who likes the new Power Automate name. He doesn't like Flow. Well, Tom, you might be in the minority there, my friend. But,
it's just that we've gotten used to it. That's all.
True.
I still call them workflows. Like, they're just workflows. I still refer to them as workflows, even though it's like it's not designer workflow.
Tom asked if Flow is now known as Power Automate. The top level is known as Power Automate. Flows are still technically called flows. So, like you say, I call them workflows.
But there's not a Flow product anymore.
No.
It's Power Automate is the product. And you create flows inside of Power Automate.
Right.
Confusing, yes.
As a brand, it's gone.
True that. Another thing that was announced was the AI builder inside of Power Automate. It's going to take me a long time to get used to saying that, where you can create models and templates or models from templates, right? And then you can train those models to create processes, right? What do you think about this?
In a demo yesterday, I saw Jeff Teeper doing that from within a document library. Like you didn't even have to go to the Power Platform screens. There was just a button that said, I don't remember what it said, but it was like run the AI builder. But yeah, that's cool stuff. That's all those people that have all those documents that are similar. They're like forms that they don't feel like making a real form. So let's just throw them all into the library and have the library understand what all the fields are in the document. That's cool stuff. I just wonder how the licensing and the cost is going to work for that, especially if you stick a button right there in a library to do it. But other than that, it's super cool. And it's like magic. It's just, but you have to train it. You have to put like hundreds of files through this training process.
You can't just do one and then be like, okay, cool.
Now,
it's pretty awesome stuff.
Were they showing this would like do OCR recognition and everything as
and
well,
picture
right?
recognition. You say flower, like what is a flower, and you import 100 pictures of different flowers, and then it knows what a flower is, and then it can recognize it in the app.
I could see that coming in handy in like field work with different, just equipment and valves and pipelines, and they do daily reports on that, and it brings that into this AI platform and can just separate metadata tag, all that stuff.
Know what a wrench is versus a screwdriver or something.
It knows a big blue widget because it's seen 1,000 pictures of a big blue widget from every angle, right? So it knows. I'm curious as to how this is going to work with the changes to manage metadata, right, which we've talked about from the Cortex perspective, because when you're creating models based around metadata, especially if you're going to tie it to a document library or list, right? So how does that affect the way a model is built when we think about things like translations and synonyms and all that stuff that we have for managed metadata? It makes it pretty interesting as to how those pieces are going to play together when we're defining, we're not just defining a model, we're defining a multifaceted model, right? We could be defining a multilingual model, which
it's like the old term store on steroids. I mean,
well, they got the new term store now.
I was about to say they announced the new term.
Did you see that?
Is it called the modern? I know that's what I was referring to. The modern term store is like the old one, but on steroids, because it has all the stuff that it did have that was good about it, but now it's got a slick modern interface, and now it's got, I guess, part of all the AI. Too.
So that's going to be real interesting. Now they said
new stuff to learn here
with 4 templates for the AI builder. There's key phrases, which is obviously going to feed into search, right? Language detection, so that it can detect what language a document or a page or a piece of content is in. That's pretty cool. When we think about, we now have multilingual capabilities in our communication and our home sites, right? So if we can detect the language for a particular document, can we tell it where to publish it in the flow? Can we make it figure out, hey, go publish this piece of this document's in Spanish, right? Go put that over on the Spanish version of the homepage or on the Mexico City divisional, right?
Right.
So how do those things play together? And there's also sentiment analysis for documents. So telling whether in a conversation if someone's angry or mad or whatnot, you get that sentiment.
In documents, you have that? It's weird.
That's what they're talking about from the AI. I think it's any piece of content. I think they're saying content in general, whether it can break documents or not. I don't know.
I'm sure you can feed all this stuff to a flow and have Azure Cognitive Services or whatever else determine what you need, and then you can direct.
Well, they had that probably ties into the compliance stuff they were showing in the demo I saw yesterday, where it's like, oh, this employee, was written up, and then this employee sent some nasty emails, and this employee downloaded 20 gigs worth of stuff, and they turned in the resignation letter, and it's all there.
Yeah, having Clippy pop up. I see you're writing a manifesto.
Allow me to make some suggestions.
Yeah, let me help you with that on the back end, security.
Have you considered quoting Kierkegaard?
Well, it's actually funny you mentioned best bets, because I was talking to Rob Bogue about this, and we'll talk more about this when we get to Cortex on Thursday. But a lot of what's driving Cortex, of course, is search behind the back end, right? And What you're really seeing is the manifestation of best bets and being able to pull data out, apply some artificial intelligence to that, right, and determine what these things should be, what things are similar, right, how those things should go together. And I can't help but think some of that is in this AI builder as well. It's got to be all the same technology on the back end of being able to say, hey, these would be suggested terms that we index because we found them in these documents. Whereas before we typed them in, now it's finding them for us and building that best bets model. So I really don't think you're that far off the mark, Paul, when we talk about that. So Tom is asking, can Power Automate be made to translate a sentence from English to Spanish to French? Yes,
Absolutely.
it can. There are
Translators in action, or it's a
You can-
connector.
you can connect to Azure to do that. There is a Azure endpoint specifically for translation. We have a set of connectors we're going to be shipping next year that will have drop-in capability for that in Power Automate, in Flows, Power Apps, as well as Nintex Workflow Cloud. And we have the distinction of being the only one to offer native Klingon translation out of the box. It's on the list. I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it when I found it. It's in the Azure spec. If you go in and look at all the languages that are supported in the Azure translation spec, Klingon is in there. I'm like, oh, come on.
Kaplah,
I got to put this in the UI. What'd you say, Paul?
kaplah.
Exactly.
I figured he'd know.
Hey, you're
we
dealing with
offer-
IT guys, it might be popular with.
I saw
So-
somebody do a Power App the other day where they had basically click a button in the Power App and it goes and all the labels basically in the whole app switch to that language.
That's cool. So yes, there you do have those capabilities. Now, the thing with translation services is it's a pay-to-play model. So it's a pay per translation. You get X amount of translations, right? And obviously, you have to have that already configured in your Azure subscription and be available.
Has anybody else here ever gotten like a $1,400 Azure subscription bill
Yeah.
and had no
Yes.
idea what you did
Yes.
or where it came
Yeah.
from?
We've all been there.
Yeah.
I think I saw ShareGate the other day announce that they have a new product that will help you assess
Monitor
where all
that.
your money is coming from. Speaking of Azure,
Yeah, been there, done that. So, but with Azure API management, you can actually throttle that. So all of our stuff's going to be going through Azure API management. So you can set thresholds for different levels that you want to have, and then it can automatically throttle those for you. It's pretty cool. Anyway, we digress. So the AI builder, I think, is going to be very interesting in helping people design processes, I think, without going through maybe the traditional step of waterfall workflow, right? Type of this step, next step, right? It's sort of making intelligent decisions.
it seems like it'll be a lot easier, and it needs it because, I mean, business users, power users, they're still it's hard.
All right, let's move on and talk about Power Apps, which now has a space in it. That's the big news, right? Is that Power Apps is no longer one word; it is two, which makes us wonder if SharePoint won't soon be getting a space in the name when it becomes PowerPoint.
Right.
That's
Or
a joke, by the way.
PowerShare.
Don't anybody quote
There
me
you
as
go.
saying Eric Shupp said that they're renaming SharePoint to PowerPoint.
Yeah.
I can see that coming on Twitter right
It's
now.
just because it's already taken. That's all.
Yeah,
That's the only reason.
right.
Has not happened. Yes, Paul, SP Yoda is back. So a few announcements from the Power Apps side. Environment variables, right? These are sort of top level variables that you can assign.
Yeah, they're really
to the
nice,
organization.
especially if you design some simple Power Apps, and a lot of people will hard code like users that can get admin privileges or just something to that effect. And you don't want to create a whole database layer in SharePoint that people can see or edit that. You can just do environment variables and set that stuff from another screen if you want, and it stores it outside of the app. So you don't have to edit your app to change those variables. And there's a lot of other reasons.
Are
to
those
use it,
shareable
but
in flows? Those environment variables? I haven't heard anything about that, but
you can use them in flows as well as power apps. So they're accessible anywhere. They kind of work almost like an entity sitting outside of CDS. I don't know if you know more about it or
I'm trying
not,
to think
but
of like use cases for that and
app settings, like if you hard
like
code all your
colors and
settings.
stuff. Maybe,
Yeah,
or-
themes. I mean, you could use it
Yeah.
for just I don't know. They had a lot of examples on the blog for it. I should probably pull it up and look.
I skimmed through that blog post today.
I did as well. but they're interesting. There has been times where I wish I could just have something stored outside of the app that I can easily change without modifying your app.
Colors are going to be the most common thing that I've had people ask about.
Oh,
doing
really?
that. And what I've come up with before is just to put them in a SharePoint list and have the app just have the SharePoint list be
Yeah.
a data
Oh,
connection.
for
in
like
there.
a corporate branding palette,
Yeah.
you want to have your defined colors.
Yeah, and have all the like
Okay.
the hex codes listed in the SharePoint list, and then the app could reference and know which colors to use, and you just change the SharePoint list to change the colors. Anyway, so
How
that
are those managed? Is that at the Office 365 Admin Center, or where's that?
no, the new thing, the
Yeah, the
variables,
environment
the environment variables, would that be in the Power Platform Admin Center? I guess. I
Yeah,
haven't delved into that.
probably so. I mean, it's under solutions, and then you got an environment variables section.
Yeah, that so you
under
have
there.
to use solutions to be able to use that. Because I never used solutions in the first place. That's why I kind
I
of
don't-
read that and I wasn't.
They said right now the Power Apps and the basic flows, it's a lot harder to use that. It's mainly geared for developers right now, but they said soon they're going to enable it right in the Power App canvas, and the flow canvas to design and get to those easier. And they said right now it's more geared for developers and whatnot, but it's coming.
But it's
We can use them. I guess there's a bunch of workarounds to get to it, but soon they're going to add it right into the canvas.
Okay.
So we can do it a lot easier. So.
All right.
Very good. Speaking of the canvas, sharing with guests is now going GA.
That's
They
good.
said.
Yeah, that's really big for when you, especially in Teams environments where you share a tab with a Power App integrated into a channel and you invite guests. They go try to use that, they just get an error. You don't have a license. Now they'll be able to go in and actually
Or like if you had
utilize
a
those
guest
Power
visit
Apps.
your SharePoint site, and then the SharePoint site had a
Yeah,
customized
the web
list.
part.
and
Yeah.
I did a whole SharePoint Power Hour the other day about the guest access thing. I had some like random person in my Power Hour just give me their email address, and I put them in my tenant just live. And
So
And there's no
you can
licensing
get to it.
ramifications for that.
I was just about
No,
to ask that.
it's
Do you
the
know about the
license he already
licensing?
had in his own Office 365 tenant applies in mine. If he doesn't have one, then I would have to pay and actually.
Okay,
Sign
so
one
we
of
do
my
have.
So they have to be
Oh.
a guest that already has a license.
They
can't
don't
be-
have to be.
Well, they
If
don't
they're
have
not,
to
then
be,
you're
but
paying for them.
okay.
So you have to assign them a license for them to be able to see that.
How do you
Power
assign a
App.
guest account a license?
You go into Azure and you have that guest accounts.
Oh,
and
the
under
licensing tab
users,
there.
and that's where you add the guest users. And all I did was add him, and since he had given me his Office 365 account, I didn't have to do anything. I just put his email address in there, and then he could log into my site.
I
And
see.
that I
Trying to-
If
invited
it was
him
like a
to.
Gmail user.
Right.
Yeah.
Power Platform is trying to get money where they can get it.
Well, I guess. Well,
You-
I suppose so.
You would think they would give you a couple per license or one-to-one licensed
Well,
guest or something, so you could
It's
at least.
interesting because the SharePoint side of Office 365, external access is free,
Yeah,
right? So you can have as many external
same with
users as you
Teams.
want.
Teams too.
So with Teams,
Groups.
So why not for sharing a power? I could get it if it was maybe they limited.
If it
to
had a
read
premium
only
connector or something.
or-
I could get why you may do that, but the included flows or Power Automate stuff, whatever, using SharePoint, I don't think should
Yeah.
need a license.
That's okay. That's interesting. Right. They're also introducing this new monitor, some kind of analytics that they have in the Power Apps. What's this about?
It's a new little button on the left side that you click to monitor your app, and supposedly it gives you a log of everything going on. I haven't really quite gotten it to work yet.
It's almost.
Have you?
They said it was
No.
helpful with
It's just a-
debugging.
A blank screen.
It's
Yeah.
more like it. So it's akin to using F12 in your browser, going to a network tab in Chrome and getting all your network calls, everything that you can map. It's just an easier UI version of that data for the users, the citizen devs creating the Power Apps. You pop it open, it shows you how many network calls you have, how long your pages take to open, which data calls are taking the longest. It's just kind of like a performance graph of all your controls and calls happening on your screen, so you know which one's taking
But
the
is
most
it
time. to
limited
load.
to your Power App though? Like it's only within the context of whatever your Power
Of
App's
the
doing.
Power
right?
App that you just
Right,
opened.
but
already,
it'll
yeah.
also, like, if you're connecting to external sources, it's going to show you that call is
Right.
taking the longest, so you know, hey, it's either the app is pulling too much data back or my data source is returning data slow to my Power
Now,
App.
is it in the app that you're currently in as you're testing it and developing it, and then you're trying things, or is it running like based on all the people currently using the app and showing you like the performance of their
Not 100% sure. I thought it was
I
just
got the
for
feeling it was
it's
a
test
debugging
runs.
tool,
Yeah,
right? Like
Okay.
you're doing it
That'd
you
be
know,
yourself.
when you hit
That's
F,
probably what-
the
yeah,
play,
yeah.
and then you play it, and then you can look at how it went.
At least that's the impression I got. And now we have published to teams. Why should we be excited about this, Chris? Do we care?
No, I mean it's cool. So it saves a lot of steps because if you ever tried to publish an app in Teams on the left rail, we're not talking just a tab or a connector. We're talking actually like a store app on the left rail being there available to all your users. Before you had to go in, add a whole bunch of goods and create these accounts. And I don't know, there's a bunch of steps involved just to get something added on the left rail. Now when you go to publish your app, you got a one button, well, a couple screens with it, but you can publish the Power App. It'll add it to your rail, to your user's rail, and you can go in app policies and stick it up there for everybody. Because when you publish it, it makes it available in the store under the company org apps or whatever. But you can also use in conjunction with policies to push that app onto the left rail all your users. So you can have, say, it's benefits enrollment time, and you create a Power App for benefit enrollment. You can publish that as an app, put it on everybody's left rail during enrollment period, and they got it there, and they can go and click it, go do what they need to do in enrollment, and it's done. So it
Nice.
kind of just gives you that customized icon, quick access to an app that the whole company would probably use, or subsets. So you can do policies based on departments and things with certain apps. So depends how big you are, what you want to put over there, but it saves a lot of time.
Interesting. Okay. Cool. All right.
I heard that Power Apps now, when you save a list as you create a new list. There's no save list as a template. When you create a new list, it has, create a list based off other lists, and now the Power App will go along with it, like if it's a customized list.
Oh, it'll bring over the Power
That's
Apps
interesting.
associated with it.
I didn't know
That's
that.
huge.
Yeah, that is nice.
So Tom asked a question. He asked for an example of a Power App for those who haven't used them.
Laura?
What's the question?
An example of a Power App. So Tom hasn't. I should qualify. Tom's company is on-prem, right? They're looking possibly at the cloud, maybe. And so some of this stuff is he's researching and trying to learn about, see how this stuff is done. So what would you use a Power App for?
Well, one just simple example is think about just customizing your SharePoint list form. So what you used to use InfoPath for,
Yep.
you could just quickly customize a list form using the Power App would be the front end interface. And then and you have other examples where you have more complex apps.
We have
apps
Jeremy
like-
Thake peeking into our booth over here.
You could do more complex apps like have, a whole HR onboarding app that instead of having a bunch of SharePoint lists and dashboard with web parts and things in a SharePoint site, they would just be opening the whole app and you'd use all the SharePoint lists as the back end, but you're making it pretty. God.
Jeremy Thake, Mr. Graph API for Microsoft. There. Jeremy at Microsoft.
You just gave everybody his email address.
Look, he's Don over there.
You might want to.
And I had a question. So when I was building some stuff a couple of days ago, I know about the premium connectors, and I know that I haven't been able to find good data on how they're charging, but I haven't looked very hard. But I saw premium actions where there's a version of send an email. It's a send an email with options, and if you customized it at a certain level, it was a premium version of send an email with options. So I don't know if they're trying to handle the problem with CPU governors, if that's where that's starting. Have they mentioned or talked anything about that?
Well, I think the idea of premium actions is the same as premium connectors, right? So actions are for Power Apps, what connectors are for Flow.
Yeah, well, approvals has a couple of little settings in it that are premium, like if you want other than approve and reject. So the approval connector itself is not premium, but those little extra settings. So that's probably what he's talking
Yeah,
about.
the
Yes.
Approval 2.0 has where you can actually, I think, ingest data along with the approval, so you can ask for a couple things from the approver versus the free version is only a simple approve or deny. So they
And I think there was like a max limit on the people that you could have on the approval.
Is that true? There's a limit on
Something like that.
The limit on the number of people call it an approval chain?
I've never heard that.
Yes, you can only have so many at once with the free versus the premium allows you more. I don't remember what it is. I think you can have up to 10 in the pipeline on the free one.
That's
quote
if you
me.
want to do parallel though, like
Yeah.
blast it to that many people all at the exact same time. If you're doing
Right.
serial, then
Yeah,
you're
it's just a
gonna
new
be,
connector each time down the
Yeah.
road. Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was the custom options, the send an email with options, and if you chose custom options, that was a premium action inside of Flow.
Interesting.
That's
Okay.
new. They didn't. Yeah, they didn't.
We're seeing a
do that.
lot more of that as they incrementally try and monetize the platform.
I'm gonna have to make a note of
Sure.
that because I really like that one. I would actually tell people to use that one instead of the approval one if they wanted to have options other than approve and reject, because you could make your own options. So that's awesome.
Right. New formula bar. What's going on with this? Why are we excited about vertical scroll bars and IntelliSense?
It's just helping people to be able to write Power Apps form. It already helps a lot. It's kind of like in Excel when you're writing a formula and it tells you the syntax of what is supposed to be in that particular formula, like an if this, then that. But Power Apps has that, but now it's like got more expand verbose sort of version of that, where it will even tell you and show you what the actual data is, like a little preview of it as you're writing the formula. So it's
Oh, so
Yeah.
like the content search web part, you could preview the search results
Kind of, yeah.
in the real time.
Almost like Excel and stuff. When you start doing VLOOKUP, it tells you what variables and things come into it. IntelliSense is going to be awesome because sometimes you'll forget the exact spelling of a function you're trying to put in there. The inner one's huge. I've gotten used to it now, but if you're a new user and you're trying to type into the editor and you hit enter, it wants to like complete what you're doing instead of doing a new line.
Oh, okay.
You got to do shift enter to do that.
So they changed shift enter to enter now.
Yeah, it's going to be hard for us. They use it all the time. I know.
Go change a slide in my
And the tab would like tab over into the text. Now it actually tabs your stuff over. It's only when you're doing, I think, that when
The
you
longer
expand,
formulas,
the longer formula stuff. So
Okay.
and the properties showing up in the drop down is going to be cool too. So.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more about the Power Virtual Agents. We mentioned this, but this is part of the Power Platform now, so it's a slightly separate piece. We were a bit confused about that yesterday. I think that's been clear. I was anyway. So you have flows that you create in the Power Platform. You have apps that you create in the Power Platform. Now you have virtual agents that you create in the Power Platform, and these are really just bots, right? At the
Yes,
end of the day.
from what I understand.
Okay. So have you played with these?
No, I haven't.
We
Have
just
you?
seen
Look
the
at
demo.
me.
That's it.
Yes, I did.
I've been on
Saw
the
a really
Teams
cool
train
demo.
this week.
So what I'm getting from looking at the demos we saw from this is we have a visual modeler for a bot, right? And you're showing like chat messages come in or requests come in.
And the modeler was really cool because on the left-hand side, you have the chat window, and you can type in what a user might type into the bot. And then it'll show you on the right-hand side in the modeler where that is in the branching. So it'll take you down, okay, so it's going to present them with these choices, and that's where you would edit the choices in the model. The thing that you gave the other day, it was like, oh, here are the 5 options that we have in our company. Pick one, kind of a thing. You can change the options, and then they pick one, and then it takes you, and so you pick one over here in the modeler, and it jumps over and shows you, okay, they picked this one, so now here's this branch, and what do you want to do in this branch?
Okay.
So
it looked pretty slick, I have to be honest, about being able to build that response flow, as it were.
Yeah.
You're almost building a workflow behind the
It's
scenes,
pretty.
Yeah.
Yeah,
right?
it seems pretty cool. Yeah.
And apparently there's some really good analytics associated with those pieces.
Yeah.
So you get a lot of information on where people are coming in and out of, what are they asking, what's your response rate at each, right? So there's a bunch of information you can mine there to see how effective those are, because we're all such a big fan of automated IVR systems, right? You never actually get to a human. There's no human at the end of the game.
I have a little chat thing
State
on my
machine,
website, and people will ping it and be like, "Are you a person?" It's the first thing they ask. Like, that's all you care about. You don't have an actual question. You just want to know if the bot is a person.
So on the software
Just needed
we
to respond
use-
to that. Learn to say yes, I am.
So this is pretty cool, and I wonder if this isn't an attendant use case. On the software that we use for doing these webinars, we can do an on-demand version of the webinar. So once we publish a webinar, it can go on demand, or you can just record one and make it on demand. There's a live chat window in the webinar, and when they enter a chat, it'll ping your phone, right? And you can respond to the chat. So people can watch your videos anytime, anywhere, and you're interactive, even though you're not actually on. So we've all done conferences where we've had to pre-record, and then we just sit there and wait for the questions, right? So if you had a sufficient virtual agent taking you through that process, one would think it could ping you on IM, or ping you in Teams, or wherever you happen to be, right? And you're just responding to stuff as you go about, like you would email, but someone's in a decision tree process inside of that. So that would be pretty cool, right? Because we'll have so much free time not interrupted by stuff. Now we want more stuff coming into our phone than we have to do, right?
Right.
Yeah, that bot chain would be frozen here at the conference.
Yeah.
Our response times are very low right now.
Dial tone. Now, one thing we learned when we were looking earlier is they're promoting this whole no code, low code, which I like to put in air quotes, right? Low code, no code, for the virtual agent process. However, if you want to go deeper and go into the code, you can by converting it to an Azure process, just a regular old Azure bot within the bot framework, right? Once you do that and convert to code, there's no going back, right? So it's like the old manifest designer in Visual Studio, right? Once you go to XML, right, you can't go back to the way it originally was. So it unfortunately, whereas external connectors for Flow and Power Apps and whatnot allow you to do some of that advanced stuff and plug it in as you're going along, at least at this point, I don't see that capability here for plugging those in. Once you have to go more advanced in the code process, you're down that path all the way, right? Which I think would be unfortunate, because if you've got a really long super duper virtual agent, then you go, oh, I need this piece down here at the end. I need to write a REST call to the Graph API, right? And now it's all in code.
That's no fun. I'm not a developer, so
That's what I said.
yeah, we're all like,
You're looking at me like I'm crazy.
Sure. Are you a developer?
Sometimes.
I kind of know it, but not. Yeah, not good at it.
But that's been one of the advantages of the pluggable model for Flow and Power Apps. I still can't call it Power Automate. Is that you can get advanced capabilities by bringing in a connector, right? You want to talk to the Microsoft Graph, there's a connector for that, right? So even though you have to know how to write a RESTful API call to make that work, it's still a pluggable component. The whole flow then doesn't suddenly become a bunch of text-based code that you have to manage. Well, in these, it does. So as soon as you change that to get away from low code, no code, you're in code all the way. Now, we could argue that we could build those and turn it over to developers to finish out. There's not necessarily anything wrong with that model. It's just you can't bring it back the other way as it stands now. So we learned that when we were looking at that stuff a bit earlier. But I think these offer up a pretty good surface. Bots have been all development so far. You want to write a bot, you got to go dev it. Right now, power users can write their own bots.
It's huge. Yeah.
Define
power user. Are they power users? Or are they citizen developers? Because Microsoft's come to this realization that they've been calling this group of people power users all these years, but it's really like a sort of upper tier of power users, of citizen developers, that you really understand logic. You're not just somebody who uses SharePoint all day long. You're somebody who can almost like be like a programmer.
Or the cowboy IT admin. That's what I like to say it.
We call him cowboy.
I'm from Texas too.
But I think you're right. There's a distinction there that we often lump those people together, which is unfair to both groups of people, because it doesn't really. There are folks, when they get to the point of having to do an expression in Power Apps, they're out.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Not doing it.
But they're a SharePoint power user.
Yeah, but I mean, both tools offer a range of skill sets. You can be a beginner and do some stuff
They do.
just
so
fine.
Maybe
But
the AI thing will be similar. They'll have just some basic things you can do being a power user, but then jump off the cliff.
then you got expressions or, advanced functions or whatever else beyond that. Who
It'll be
knows?
fun to play with.
Yeah, well, but that's
Lots of
the
power hour
divergence.
stuff.
Yes.
You have those expressions and formulas and functions in Power Apps and Flow. You don't have those here in the virtual agents. Right?
Yeah, I
Then you're
don't
going
know.
all the way flipping over to code. At least that's my understanding of how it works. We'll know more as we see. Paul denotes those as power users. And make sure you get those spaces in there. Don't run
That's
them together as power user without a space because that's not allowed.
And what is the pricing though for the AI, the Power Agent? Is that you know?
I don't know. I didn't see anything about pricing on the
Nope.
virtual agents.
Same with the other stuff we were
I'm sure
talking
it's
about.
Free. Yeah, to start. First hit's always free,
That's
right?
right.
While it's in preview, it's free, and then after that, it's $40 a
Until
user
you're
per month.
dependent upon it because you have a business process that's using it, right? And then it's
Yeah. Once you've got about 100 of them, then it's time to pay the bill, right? Awesome. All right. So, anyone else have any more thoughts on the Power announcements, things that happened at Ignite? Well, let's wrap up with a few thoughts here. This is your fourth Ignite? You've been to all of them, right?
All of
You all
them, yeah.
come to Ignite. What's your overall impressions this year?
I like the lighting.
I asked
aesthetics
you-
here are nice.
You
To
know
give
what?
a response on a technical question, and you stereotyped me back by talking about the lighting. Wow.
You know what's funny though? That's the first thing that comes to my mind too, because I like it, but I don't at the same time because it's hard to see people because it's so dark.
For those who aren't here, as you can see behind us, it's a little bit dark. It's actually a lot dark in here.
Except for the part where the vendors are.
Except for the part where the vendors are. That is blindingly white. As you walk around, the lights are all in your eyes. So on the hub side over here, it's very dark and muted. and they
Developer
got
dark,
multicolored
maybe.
light. It's
Yeah,
almost
exactly.
developer dark.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's cozy. Well,
Yeah.
I was
Hey,
I was
got these
actually
black light
Everything
sections over
dark
here.
mode, dark hub.
yeah.
Ignite has gone dark mode.
Yeah, there you go.
They,
Come
I
new
was on the planning committee for the very first Ignite in Chicago. To go out to Chicago like a couple months before, and we all sat at a round table and talked about like all the concept, like big picture conference stuff, like the community stuff and the hub, and like all the stuff about the conference. And so that's what I'm thinking about the conference as a whole. When you asked me that, and so I like the way they did the dark lighting, and I like there's just so much community is enforced as far as physical places you can go hang out with your community.
I like
friends.
this
Yeah.
hub section. This
That
hub
is good.
stuff is
This
really
area.
good.
It's nice.
Because
Yeah.
it used to be just sort of an adjunct off to where the vendors were.
Yeah.
Right?
Oh, you
And
mean
now-
the tech community or the community section all right here?
but all
yeah.
these little pieces were just sort of there. It didn't really make any sense. Now they're all in a totally separate section over here, and they've got the hangouts over here, the weird swings. Right?
Yeah.
Have you been back to the weird swings?
Not yet.
Yeah, they're
it's,
kind of odd.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
You can
Um,
sit on a swing and put in your headphones and watch the breakouts.
Yeah, but the swings are like these.
Oh, there they are
metal
over there. I see
stage
'em.
things with change. Yeah, it's bizarre. Anyway,
I came to this realization that a lot of people here actually aren't on Twitter. Do you know
Okay.
that? It's
Really?
so weird. Like,
I'm rarely on Twitter.
so
If
it's,
I'm not
Yeah,
riffing
you
on a
aren't
keynote,
anymore.
when am I
The
on Twitter?
only-
Yeah, you're like what? You're
Twice a year.
your purpose Twitter guy. That's
so a
only
lot of
for
these
a
people,
reason.
their only like community experience is physically being in this room
Right.
and interacting with people in these little community areas because they have no idea that how social we all are.
And
on
we
Twitter. all-
also have, which you can't see behind us right over there, and they're not there right now, is we have
The
a
puppies.
white picket fence for companion animals. So yesterday there were a bunch of dogs in there, right, hanging out, and you could go over there and get your feel goods. What the place was mobbed yesterday. Did you walk by there about lunchtime yesterday? There were people all over. They were queuing in a line to go see the companion animals. I don't know whose
They're
idea
cute
that
little
was.
puppies.
Bro, I
Are
wonder
they
if
like
it's vendor sponsored.
Are they like Minecraft animals
Yeah.
or something?
No, they.
No.
I didn't see any with a pickaxe. Nobody's
We can't go hit the
Nobody's
floor and it
building
drops
train
them
tracks
down
to
through.
save the chicken. All right, so we
Run
are
'em with
going to
some
go ahead
arrows.
and wrap it up for today's installment. Be sure to join us tomorrow for day 3. I actually got the titling wrong here. We will be talking about. Will we be talking about Teams tomorrow, Chris?
Hopefully so. We'll see.
Hopefully, we will talking about Teams tomorrow, and maybe seeing some demos possibly.
Yeah, I got the demo thing locked down.
You got
so.
the demos locked down.
Yeah.
Okay, we need you to show up.
I know. If not me, I'll get someone else from MVP from Teams team to come by.
All right. Well, we will have some Teams content for you tomorrow. So ignore the titling of the last slide. It will be Teams content. It will be the same time tomorrow. We'll update the invite and send out a new one for everyone to join us tomorrow. in the same time and location. So I want to thank all of our guests. Thank you especially to Laura Rogers from IW Mentor. And they can see you tomorrow again doing what?
SharePoint Power Hour at 2:20.
2:20.
What's your
on
topic
November
tomorrow?
6th.
Just the conference.
Haven't had it yet?
updates
Okay.
yeah.
Make it up as you go along, kind of like we do.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about the AI agent
AI
builder
builder.
thing.
There
I'll
you go.
learn it between now and then.
And do a live demo. I'll tune in for that.
We'll see.
If you need any guests, hit us up.
I want to thank Sean Skinner as well for joining us, and of course Chris Webb. Thank you everyone for joining us, and do look for the recordings to be posted within the next week. And we will see you all tomorrow on Microsoft Ignite Live.
In 10 seconds.